Hey everyone. I wanted to share that I have a new extra innings episode, which is a fun one. Using historical facts and new research, I do a revisionist take on the 1919 Black Sox scandal. My question: what would baseball have looked like at the time, and for years to follow, if Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis had only suspended Shoeless Joe Jackson for 1 or 2 years instead of a lifetime? To me, the rippling effects would have been enormous in so many aspects of the game and life outside it. You can find this episode and 17 others that aren't available on any other feed at Patreon/Midnight Library of Baseball. Okay, here's tonight's episode. There was a time in the evolution of everything that works when it didn't. I love this quote, which comes from a West Wing episode. One of the subset shells of the Midnight Library is exploring these transitional moments between when something didn't and then does work, or between the time when something didn't and then does exist. And usually it's a moment we don't remember or don't know. These moments are blips in history. The moment we're going to talk about tonight happened in 1941, and it would forever change the way we experience baseball. And no, I'm not talking about Pearl Harbor. What I'm talking about is quieter than that, more ordinary, easy to miss in the moment. This is what happened.
America runs on Bolivar time.
Now, what's the big deal? That's the question. And it's the one we're going to answer tonight. Because this episode is about how advertising in baseball didn't arrive all at once. It crept in on tiptoes. How a series of small, polite insertions meant not to intrude slowly transformed into something else entirely. Into commercials that didn't just interrupt the game. They began to compete with it for our attention. And all the while, we listened, we watched, and we barely noticed what exactly was happening. But, according to advertising historian Roberta Newman, this moment in 1941 was cataclysmic. And tonight, we'll find out why. From historic milestones
That did it! Holy cow! A strikeout gets his 300th career win, and I tell you, this is...
to euphoric moments shared by millions,
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
to the simple banter that brought us together,
Yeah, it's foul. Malachi with the call. I love that name.
It's a good name.
When you and I have a child together, we should name him Malachi.
Welcome to the Midnight Library of Baseball, Season 4, the broadcast that raised us, from radio to television and beyond. I'm Ben Orlando. By now, many of the characters in Season 4 feel like old friends, to me at least, and maybe to you. Like our old friend Harold Arlen, who sat at a Pirates game in 1921 with a wooden plank across his lap, a telephone, and a very long cord. Arlen announced the very first baseball game that was transmitted on the radio. And remember, outside of being the very first broadcast, something else stood out about Arlen's announcing. No banter, no chit-chat.
Here's the windup for the next pitch, and it's high and outside. The count is now 2-2 on Chapman. Hamlin sets himself, starts his windup, 2-2 is the count. Struck out, swinging at a curve, outside and high.
Simply reporting the ball game and remaining silent the rest of the time, which to the modern baseball fan seems crazy. Even crazier, this tradition endured into the next decade. Even though opera singer turned broadcaster Graham McNamee introduced banter to the broadcast only a few years after Harold Arlen. Still, this style of broadcasting took time to catch on. As Eldon Ham explains in his book, Broadcasting Baseball, even into the 1930s, some teams, like the St. Louis Browns, forbade broadcasters to engage in banter. And notice, we're not even talking about commercials. This is a whole other level. From one perspective, this ban on banter seems a bit ridiculous, that the powers in charge of baseball would work so hard to curb this from happening. And fans of Graham McNamee really liked his style of announcing, of describing everything, and that was 1923 on. But from another perspective, it makes perfect sense to try to stop the banter. Because for every baseball fan in the world, before baseball on the radio, there was only one way to hear a game, and that was to go to a game. And if you went to a game, you didn't have some guy sitting next to you talking about player stats and Babe Ruth anecdotes. Well, maybe you did, but it would probably be your dad or brother or friend. Mostly, you'd be watching the game. You'd be focused on the players and the game within the game. You'd be taking in your surroundings. This experience was precious, unadulterated, and banter was seen as intrusive, not in line with the pure experience of a Major League Baseball game. So the scrutiny of broadcasts lasted for more than a decade. Now, the only book I could find on advertising and baseball is titled Here's the Pitch by Roberta Newman. It's a fairly scholarly work, but Newman has lots of great stories and insights about the progression of advertising linked to baseball. And one sentence on page 76 stopped me in my tracks. Newman wrote, quote, "Until the mid-1930s, the majority of baseball broadcasts remained unsponsored." End quote. Just take that in. Radio had been broadcasting baseball since 1921. We're talking a decade and a half of aired baseball games without ads. Now, as William K. Wrigley Jr. pointed out, there was advertising in a way. He said radio, quote, offered owners a 2-hour daily commercial for their games, end quote. Listening to the game itself was advertising for future games, either on the radio or in person. But there were no ads of products. As Newman states, baseball on the radio was viewed as a public service. Baseball as a public service. This was truly the golden age of baseball on the radio for listeners, because they could listen without being asked for anything in return. Only their attention, and not even all of it. Writer James R. Walker wrote about the embargo on World Series advertising. He wrote that these broadcasts were, quote, the most forcefully protected from the stain of over-commercialization. The combination of a monolithic commissioner, radio-wary owners, and a major league level monopoly, and an American culture increasingly suspicious of advertising, kept the crown jewel of all sports broadcasts unsponsored until 1934. End quote. I like how Walker describes the American public in the 30s as increasingly suspicious of advertising. They have no idea what's about to hit them over the coming decades. And if these people from the 1930s saw the state of things today, their heads would probably explode. Even considering all of these factors, It's still hard to believe that the business of baseball was sacrificed for the purity of the game. 13 years. That's billions of dollars of lost revenue for a principle. Now, this isn't to say there wasn't advertising on the radio or baseball players advertising on the radio. Remember before I talked about Babe Ruth flubbing his lines in a Wheaties commercial and Lou Gehrig doing the same. Those were radio broadcasts, but they were for other types of programming, not baseball games. And this contrast made the baseball experience even more precious, knowing that other programming was interrupted by ads, but baseball was not. Baseball was immune. But in 1934, because of monetary pressures, the gates finally opened. Advertising entered the picture. And now we reach part 2 of the story, the polite, gentle intrusion. It begins with training. No, not that kind of training. Broadcasters like Red Barber were sent to a preseason training conference in 1939, sponsored by General Mills, the cereal company. Since General Mills was actually paying the contracts of Barber and other broadcasters, they could do this type of thing. They could hold an entire conference and tell broadcasters what to do. And so they instructed them on how to do play by play in a way that would grow the crowd. They instructed on how to tie in sponsors to the general broadcast in a way that felt natural, unobtrusive, kind of like this.
No runs, one hit. So Bankhead didn't help himself when he ran over to third base when Reese hit that half-speed ground ball short. Well, folks, Post Stereo's very happy to bring you the ball games. Very quickly, let me run over the Post scoreboard. At the end of an inning and a half of the Cardinal-Cub game, it is 3-1 in favor of the Cardinals.
It's very subtle. Red Barber is ending his call on a play, and then a mention of Post cereal, and then moving on to scores. And this is how it goes. There's more talk of sponsorship at the beginning and ends of games, but it's still within the game. It is not interrupting the game. It's not pulling you out. And this is absolutely intentional. But there is something a bit sinister about this strategy, isn't there? As the ads become subliminal, unconsciously received into your brain, they become a part of the game. For example, when someone hits a home run, Mel Allen would call it a Ballantine blast for Ballantine beer. And Red Barber would say, "There goes an old Goldie," for every home run. Barber said this not as slang or a nod to his Southern roots. He said it because the broadcast was sponsored by Old Goldie cigarettes. But what happens over time with this kind of messaging? People hear, "There goes an old Goldie," and a home run becomes forever linked to a cigarette. Now imagine a man sitting at the bar, watching a ball game, and someone hits a home run. It's not even Red Barber saying, "There goes an old Goldie," but in the man's mind, that home run is linked to an old Goldie. And maybe he has a sudden craving for a cigarette. This is advertising gold, or Goldie. But this is the supreme intention of advertising, to get a product locked in your unconscious. And this is what was happening with baseball and radio ads. And it's nothing new. It was happening with ads peppered across the baseball field. It happened with newspaper and magazine ads. The bullpen was named after Bull Durham tobacco that had giant signs behind the area where pitchers would warm up. So a product is worked into a game day after day. And not only does it become routine, it becomes ritual, a part of the culture. For instance, whenever Red Barber would call out an old Goldie smacked out of the park, something also happened on the field, which Barber might describe to listeners. As Roberta Newman wrote in her book, Barber might describe, quote, "a carton of cigarettes sliding down the mesh behind home plate, where PA announcer Tex Rickards, leaving his customary perch beside the dugout, would fetch the sponsor's product, bringing it to the eager players in the dugout every time a ball left the yard. End quote. In other words, Red Barber would say, "There goes an old Goldie," when someone hit a home run, and then this ritual would happen. An entire carton of cigarettes would slide down the mesh behind home plate, and the announcer would take it to the dugout. Fans at the game would see this happening, and listeners on the radio would hear this happening. And that phrase, bringing it to the eager players in the dugout, forms in my mind an image of ball players reaching, grabbing for the packs of cigarettes, salivating even. It's very Pavlovian. You can think of it as similar to product placement in TV and films today. And this type of advertising may seem loud and distracting, but it's actually still a part of the game. In fact, it's now a ritualistic part of the home run celebration, not intruding, but amplifying the moment. Fans weren't blind to the advertising, and they also appreciated it because they felt it was polite, it was respectful. But all this would end with this.
America runs on Bulova time.
What you just heard was part of the very first sanctioned televised commercial in history, and it happened during a baseball game. Picture a black screen with an outline of the United States map in gray. And in the center of the map is a clock with numbers, 2 hands, and the words Bulova and watch time. And then the audio. America runs on Bulova time. That's it. 10 seconds. It feels like almost nothing. But advertising historian Roberta Newman described the commercial as, quote, a cataclysmic event, though it would take the better part of a decade for its full impact to be felt, end quote. What just happened? Well, a baseball broadcast was interrupted during a Phillies Dodgers game. 10 seconds, that's all. But it's 10 more seconds than ever existed before. This is the moment when a commercial intrudes. It interrupts, and it competes with the main event for attention. But in such a slight, quiet, innocuous way that we humans didn't even notice. When we get to the present time and see all that commercialization has become in baseball, we come back to this time, 1941, as the turning point. What was the monetary cost of this groundbreaking event? $9. Today, it costs companies millions of dollars for a few seconds of air, especially if you're talking World Series or Super Bowl. Millions of dollars. This ad in 1941 for Bulova watches cost $9. That's 36 quarters. That converts to around $200 today. I'd say it was a pretty good deal. But what was the cultural cost of the Bulova ad? As more Americans purchased TV sets, more people were exposed to this new kind of advertising, which was unlike anything they'd ever experienced. So it made sense that the ads were, as Newman put it, sticky. Companies conducted polls and were shocked to discover how many people remembered which ads ran for which baseball teams. Again, this was advertising gold. With newspapers, with magazines, you reach peoples in dribbles and drabs. But with television and a captive audience, a 10-second spot could reach millions at once. And so began the age of the commercial. When we return, Act 3. Hi, everyone. I love making this show, and I know you love listening to it. But the truth is, I'm only one man. Many popular podcasts that come out weekly have crews of a dozen or more. Right now, I'm trying to find a home at a podcast network, which would allow me to create the same quality shows, but more consistently and more frequently. But to get there, I need to grow. If you want more consistent, frequent content, please leave a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen. It really helps. It also helps to tell a friend you think might like the show. And thank you for all the support you've already given. Okay, back to tonight's episode. Act 3. The new, quiet kid in school grows up to become the most popular guy in the room. From 1941 to 1951 to 1961, commercial times grew from a few seconds to minute-long cigarette ads in the 1950s, like this one.
You know, if you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily round of calls, you'd find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with him. Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" Once again, the brand named most was Camel. Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels?
There is no music in this ad, just pictures of a doctor going through his day, leaning back in his chair, and lighting up a cigarette. For the 1960s, it was beer and also baseball-related items, like this baseball card cereal tie-in.
Your life. I'm cutting out my baseball trading cards. What trading cards? The ones you get free on all Post cereal packages. Pictures of the top major leaguers with rundowns on all of them. Wow. And you get as many as 7 on every Post cereal package. 200 in all. Free. Wow. And all you have to do is buy Post cereals. Let's see them. Gee, there's Roger Maris and Willie Mays and Mickey Mouse.
As time goes by, there are more and more breaks and longer breaks, and this changes the experience. Now, you might think, isn't baseball made for commercial breaks? You have the changeover between innings when nothing's happening. That seems perfect for a commercial. Yes and no, because the television commercial fundamentally changed the experience in several key ways. First, for a radio broadcast, listeners don't leave the game. During inning changes, broadcasters continue to talk about the game, or they tell an anecdote, or they mention a sponsor or two. But you're still there with them, with the sounds of baseball filling your ears. Second, with television ads comes a break in trust. And this is key to my whole season 4, the broadcast that raised us. It's about the trust we give to broadcasters to guide us through games. Not just anybody, but specific personalities we choose and learn to love. So even if they're taking a moment to mention an ad, it's still them. It's still Mel Allen. It's still Dizzy Dean. It's still Phil Rizzuto. But with television, now the broadcasters disappear, replaced by a company, a corporation, and we've lost that precious connection. They go away, leaving us with strangers trying to sell us something. A third key change is the quality of the fan's attention. For radio, the fan's attention is relaxed. It's freely given over to the broadcaster. But with television commercials separate from the game, now you have to earn our attention. You have to capture our attention, and this becomes an arms race, forever escalating. And baseball players are recruited to do the capturing, to create memorable, sticky ads. In the beginning, commercials aren't very sticky. That first Bulova watch ad, not very sticky. Take this commercial from the late 50s, starring Dodgers player Pee Wee Reese.
Pee Wee Reese has a way with Dodger rookies or Sandlot youngsters. Pee Wee, you do a lot of work with boys.
Not work, Al. I like baseball and kids. I enjoy helping teenagers start right.
Oh, that's around shaving age. And you give them pointers on personal appearance, too?
Yes, a boy has more self-respect when he's clean-shaved. I tell him to use a Gillette razor, Al.
You said it. The Gillette Super Speed Razor.
It's pretty ordinary, but it's banking on the star power and credibility of Reese. At the time, that was enough. Or this ad from the 1970s. This ad is all about appealing to the viewer's values. It's memorable if it connects personally, but it's not going for straight up engaging. And this is astounding to me that from 1941 and that first Bulova watch commercial up to the late 1970s, there were commercials people remembered, but that's from embedding, from repetition. There weren't many ads people talked about. It just wasn't in the advertising culture to even consider creating commercials that outshine the programs they were sponsoring. For more than 30 years, this was the case. And this was especially true with sports related commercials. It reminds me of the story of the Wilson A2000 glove, how it took nearly 90 years for glove makers to change their thinking, that the glove didn't have to resemble the human hand. It took advertisers nearly 40 years to understand that if you make the ad really funny and sensational, if you try to create a water cooler moment, you have a better chance of creating a sticky commercial. And this did happen in the late 70s and 80s with this ad campaign.
You know, one of the best things about being an ex-big leaguer is getting freebies to the game. Call the front office, bingo. And once these fans recognize me, I probably won't even have to pay for my light beer from Miller. Down it, I love them. These fans know I drink light because it's less filling and it tastes great. Good seats, huh?
You're in the wrong seat, buddy. Come on.
Oh, I must be in the front row.
Come on.
The Miller Lite Tastes Great Less Filling campaign was built around the first ever light beer. The whole idea of a light beer was new to the world. So, how do you promote the product without bad-mouthing your existing regular beer? The ad agency McCann Erickson thought long and hard and came up with a plan. First, in order to dispel the myth that drinking light beer was weak or feminine, they used masculine male athletes to counteract the whispers. And in order to not insult the female population, they made the campaign fun and silly so people wouldn't take it too seriously. But at the same time, they would see this new product being consumed by some of the most popular athletes in the world. And some of these athletes were ball players. The ad with George Steinbrenner and Billy Martin is a perfect example.
You know, a lot of people think Billy and I argue all the time. Actually, we agree on just about everything, right, Bill?
Yeah, you betcha, George.
We even drink the same beer.
Light beer from Miller. Light's got a third less calories than the regular beer, and it's less filling.
And the best thing is it tastes so great.
No, George, the best thing is less filling.
No, Bill, it tastes great.
Less filling, George.
Billy, it tastes great.
Less filling, George.
Billy?
Yeah, George.
You're fired.
Oh, not again.
Light beer from Miller.
It creates humor by flipping expectations. It was well known that Yankees manager Billy Martin and Yankees owner George Steinbrenner did not get along, that Steinbrenner had fired Martin multiple times and then hired him back. In the commercial, the two are having a friendly beer together, which is already strange. Then they start arguing, and Steinbrenner fires Martin again. But it's done in a lighthearted way, both of the men laughing, so the viewer doesn't take it too seriously. And this relief leads to more humor, and it's great water cooler material. Now, for anyone listening to this podcast born after 1990, you might not know that people in offices used to gather around the water cooler to gossip or talk about what was happening in the world. Maybe today you'd say the group chat moment. But I can easily see people at work in the 70s saying, "Hey, did you see that Miller Lite commercial with Steinbrenner and Billy Martin? Wasn't that funny? The two of them pretending to get along?" Even more than this single ad was the entire campaign itself, commercial after commercial, with different personalities arguing, taking sides. Tastes great, less filling. It becomes an entire cultural movement.
Yeah, you get to buy a light beer from Miller. Yeah, less Philly.
These commercials were sticky, and they were now something people looked forward to. And the strategy only grew. In the 80s, Bo Knows. In the 90s, Ken Griffey Jr. running across the United States to catch a ball hit by Don Mattingly.
At back, 1 out, runner on third. Here's the pitch. Mattingly hits it deep to right center.
I got it.
I got it.
Commercials become events, and they also become extremely intrusive. Speaking of intrusive, since we're talking about commercials, I thought it would be a good time to debut the first ever high production, very expensive Midnight Library of Baseball commercial.
You know, I love Midnight Library of Baseball because of the fascinating hidden insights in each story.
Actually, Midnight Library of Baseball is great because of the emotional connection I feel with each show.
No, it's hidden insights.
Emotional connection.
Hidden insights.
Emotional connection. Shh.
Hidden insights.
Emotional connection.
Hidden insights.
Emotional connection. Midnight Library of Baseball. Hidden insight and emotional connection in every show. If you told someone from the 1950s that someday people will care more about the commercial than the sporting event being sponsored, they would say, "You're insane." This is what has happened. And when we look at where we've come, well, it's an interesting journey. Advertising today is everywhere. You have companies spending millions to create the new buzz, to overload fans with products and suggestions. The question is there a line to cross? And have they crossed it? I found an article from 2024 on defector.com titled sarcastically, "MLB's television product is getting shittier in exciting new ways." The gist of the article is that broadcasts now use green screen technology to superimpose product names on background objects at the stadium, which can create strange blurred effects for viewers. But also, the camera is now not centering the batter, as it always did. Instead, sometimes the batter is off center in order to make sure a certain product is completely in the picture. As author Chris Thompson wrote, quote, "MLB broadcasts are doing a lot of screwing around with backstop ads lately, almost entirely to the detriment of the viewing experience." End quote. I found another article from 2023 about the intrusion of ads in radio broadcasts. The title of the article is "Nader Calls on MLB to Ban In-Game Ads During Baseball Radio Broadcasts." End quote. That's Nader as in Ralph Nader, longtime political activist and repeated presidential candidate. And he's 89 years old at the time he participated with Ken Reed, sports policy director of the League of Fans. It's interesting because in the infancy of advertising in baseball, it was only broadcasters talking about broadcasts during the game. But here in 2023, Ralph Nader and Ken Reed say that these in broadcast ads have become too intrusive. Through some data collection, Nader and Reed found that some teams had as many as 50 ads during a radio broadcast. And what Nader and Ken Reed said was that it's okay to have ads during breaks, between innings, but these are ads during the game. They added, quote, We remember listening with pleasure to Mel Allen's radio broadcasts of the New York Yankee games. Commercials were reserved for the commercial breaks between half innings. Now the commercials have become a significant part of the broadcast. End quote. Nader and Reed finished their article by saying, quote, baseball fans are historically finicky. Step over the line once too often, and who knows? Baseball fans could start turning off the games, or the advertisers, or both. End quote. But what we see throughout the history of baseball on television and radio is that fans come along. As I said in the beginning, commercials creep in, tiptoeing more and more until you don't notice how different things are. In the last 50 years, commercial time went from a few minutes in the 1940s to as many as 50 minutes in the 2000s. But Major League Baseball did recently make a sacrifice when they introduced the pitch clock and other time-saving measures. On the website linedrivesportsmarketing.com, Ed Olson runs the numbers, finding that if you lose 4 minutes of ad break time, that adds up to $20,000 per game in lost revenue for teams, which adds up in a season across all of baseball to around $100 million lost. But this change in advertising didn't have anything to do with advertising. It was a consequence of speeding up the game. So really, we still haven't addressed this question from Ralph Nader. Where's the line? Is there a line? For more than 10 years, fans were able to listen to the game with zero interruptions from advertisers or broadcasters advertising. Today, it's 40 plus minutes of interruptions. But for most of us, we've simply learned to live with it. It just is the way it is. But what if it went back to the way it was? Just the sounds of baseball.
In rides the next pitch. A fastball. Little outside, a little low. Now just started to go and changed his mind. 2 balls and 1 strike. O'Brien, an infielder, is down in the Pittsburgh bullpen throwing. Maybe that he'll come into the ball game for Pittsburgh. Somebody from the bench apparently is giving Frank Secoya, plate umpire, a little jockeying. Pulls his mask off and turns around and looks into the Pittsburgh dugout.
Tonight's listener baseball story comes from a baseball fan and player in his youth, turned 20-year broadcaster, turned mental health champion. Tom from Alberta, Canada. Here's his story.
I grew up in Saskatchewan, in Western Canada, but the Expos were just my team, and I was an Expos fan forever. I was heartbroken in '81. Like, the irony was yesterday when people talked about Blue Monday, and the only Blue Monday I recognize is 1981 when Rick Monday hit that home run, and I punched a locker at high school. I was in grade 10, and we were all watching in our student center, and yeah, you never forget those things. My dad took me out in the backyard and played catch. And so my wife laughs because every time Field of Dreams comes on, I start crying. It's just automatic. It's just because no matter, I mean, he was a farmer, and he had other jobs and worked really hard, but he always found the time when he came home to grab his old black diamond catcher's mitt and we'd go in the backyard and I'd throw. And I started organized ball when I was 6. The division was called Fleas, so we were Fleas. Then I played 3 years of Mosquitoes, and then that third year I got called up to Beavers. We ended up going to our provincial championship tournament. It was and again, something you never forget, because you're with a team, you're with a group of friends, and even the journey along the way, there were some missteps as we went through. My dad was just incredible with encouragement and driving me to games. And he, when you hit balls out to the outfield for warm up kind of thing, what everybody remembered was how he'd only use one hand. He'd toss the ball up with one hand, and with the other hand, he'd have his bat in his hand, and he'd hit it. Because if he ever used two, I don't think we'd still be looking for the balls, because the man had incredibly large arms. I remember one day he was coaching first base for us, and there was a close call at first, and it went the other way for us. And he looked at the umpire. I don't know if I can say this, but he said, "Will you quit playing pocket pool and watch the game?" And the umpire just kind of looked at him, and the rest of our team were just kind of, our eyes got this big, and it was just like, I'd never heard my dad get that worked up. We just got such a big kick out of that, and I think it just relaxed us after that, and we just kept on playing. But your latest episode and talking about Mel Allen, and I immediately associate Mel Allen with This Week in Baseball. Listening to her and watching, Tony Kupek and Bob Costas on Saturdays, and of course Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola, and the voices, and maybe some of that stuck in my head because I ended up being a sportscaster for 20 years. So if you weren't able to play the game at a high level, you could talk about it. And so I had that chance to do that. One of my biggest thrills as a sportscaster was one year when Bill Lee came to Grand Prairie, Alberta to play a charity game, and I got a chance to interview Bill Lee, the spaceman. It was just such a cool dude to talk to. He really was. After 20 years, it was May in 2008, I had a run-in with depression, shall we say. I was put on stress leave for 3 months. The timing was like, yep, it might be time to do something else. I shifted, and I'm a big believer in mental health. My dad died by suicide in 1999. And I saw Dad, when I look back at Dad, and I can remember certain instances where it's like, okay, yeah, he did deal with depression. In 2002, I became an advocate and a volunteer with the local suicide prevention organization. Because of my experience with them and talking about my dad's story and looking back at it and realizing, that he dealt with depression during his life, even though he hid it very well, I was able to deal with mine and, come out of it on the other side. It's something people need to be aware of their mental health and not be afraid to ask for help. I am involved in a program that started out, we called it men at risk because it was targeted at men in the industry and trades because it was the highest group of people that died by suicide. And then the program evolved into being called now Tough Enough to Talk About It. I like to feel that even if we can help one person deal with what they're dealing with and save a life or two, it's a big thing. So it's been quite a journey, and through it all, sports has kind of been there for me, and baseball's part of that.
Thanks, Tom, for sharing such an important story. Next time, in episode 16, I explore the life and career of a maybe not so memorable player, but certainly iconic broadcaster and personality.
Well, it's that time again, World Series time, and your heart must quicken.
Well, of course it is World Series time, and I guess, as I've said before, when the word baseball is mentioned, I guess my name would automatically come to your mind.
Yes, it
The life of Bob Uecker. Next time on the Midnight Library of Baseball. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergei Papkin and Ashot Danielian, and other artists at Pixabay and Artlist.io. Good night.